The silence in our house was a new and unwelcome resident. It had moved in the day my wife, Eleanor, died, and a week after her funeral, it had taken over every room, filling the spaces that used to be occupied by her laughter, her music, her voice. I would wander from the living room to the kitchen, a ghost in my own home, her scent still lingering faintly on the throw pillows, her favorite mug still sitting by the sink. Grief was not the sharp, violent thing I had expected. It was a slow, colorless fog that muted the world, a heavy blanket that smothered all other emotions. Our 40 years together had not been a chapter of my life. They were the book. And now, the book was closed. It was in this fog of mourning that the package arrived. A sleek, modern-looking box, delivered by a courier, addressed to me. It was from my children, Mark and Sarah. A flicker of warmth, the first I'd felt in days, touched my heart. They were worried about me, of course. Their calls were frequent, their voices laced with a pained, awkward concern. I assumed this was another gesture of that concern, perhaps a book on grieving, or a collection of old family photos they had put together. I appreciated their effort, even as I knew that nothing could truly touch the profound, isolating nature of my loss. I placed the box on the dining room table, the same table where Eleanor and I had shared thousands of meals, and carefully cut the tape. Inside, nestled in a bed of pristine white paper, was a welcome kit for a dating service called Silver Linings, an app designed for people over 50. There was a glossy brochure with pictures of smiling, vibrant seniors holding hands on a beach, and a small, credit card-sized gift card. I picked it up. It was a paid, 1-year, premium subscription. My name was printed elegantly beneath the logo. I was, for a moment, simply confused. This had to be a mistake, a terrible, misaddressed delivery. Then I saw the card, tucked into a small sleeve in the lid of the box. It was from my children. "Dearest Dad," my daughter Sarah's handwriting began. "We know how much you're hurting, and we hate seeing you so alone. We know it's soon, but life has to go on. Mom would want you to be happy and to find companionship again. We thought this might be a way to help you start your next chapter. All our love, Mark and Sarah." The words, meant to be kind, landed like a flurry of stinging blows. They saw my grief not as a testament to my love, but as a problem to be solved, a state of loneliness to be immediately rectified. The warmth I had felt moments before vanished, replaced by a cold, hollow shock that was somehow worse than the grief itself. They didn't understand. They didn't see that my aloneness was not a void to be filled, but a space that was still sacredly, completely, and permanently occupied by my love for their mother. They weren't offering me comfort. They were offering me a replacement. They were trying to fast forward my mourning, to rush me through the messy, painful process of grieving because my sadness was making them uncomfortable. In their clumsy, well-intentioned, and profoundly cruel gesture, they were not just trying to move me on, they were trying to erase her. For 3 days, the Silver Linings gift card sat on the mantelpiece, propped up against a framed photo of Eleanor and me on our wedding day. The smiling, silver-haired couple on the card seemed to mock the young, hopeful couple in the photograph. The gift had become a symbol of the vast, unbridgeable chasm that had opened between me and my children. They lived in a world of quick fixes, of therapeutic jargon and the relentless pursuit of happiness, a world where grief was an illness to be cured as quickly as possible. I lived in a world where the loss of my wife was a permanent amputation of my soul, a wound that would never fully heal, nor did I want it to. Feeling profoundly alienated from my own children, I sought solace in the only other person on earth whose grief mirrored my own. I drove to the house where Eleanor had grown up, the house where her father, George, still lived. He was 85, a man of quiet, stoic dignity, now doubly burdened by the loss of his wife a decade ago and his only child just last week. The house was a museum of Eleanor's life, her childhood drawings still taped to the inside of a kitchen cabinet, her high school track trophy still lining a dusty shelf in the study. George and I sat in his sun-drenched living room, the air thick with the scent of old books and pipe tobacco. We didn't talk much about Eleanor directly. We didn't need to. Her presence was in the silence between us. We spoke of the weather, of the failing local sports team, of the rose bushes she had planted for him years ago that were still blooming. It was a comfortable, shared silence, the kind that can only exist between two people who understand the depth of each other's loss without needing to name it. We were two captains of two different ships, wrecked on the same shore. Looking at George, at his quiet, lonely dignity, I saw a grief that was in some ways even more profound than my own. I had lost my partner, my other half. He had lost his child, a wound that defies the natural order of the universe. He was navigating this landscape of loss with a quiet fortitude that I found both heartbreaking and deeply admirable. He was a man from a different generation, one that didn't talk about starting new chapters or moving on. They honored their dead with memory, with loyalty, with a grief that was a lifelong testament to their love. It was in that quiet living room, surrounded by the ghosts of Eleanor's past, that a strange and reckless idea began to form in my mind. It was a plan born of my own frustration with my children and a new, fierce, and protective empathy for George. I thought of the gift card on my mantelpiece, of my children's callous, clinical prescription for my grief. Their logic was simple: a grieving person needs a replacement. If that was truly what they believed, then their logic could be applied elsewhere. I knew then what I had to do with their thoughtless, cruel gift. The following Sunday was our new, mandatory family dinner, a tradition my children had started after the funeral to keep an eye on me. The atmosphere in Mark's trendy, minimalist apartment was one of forced cheerfulness. My children and their respective spouses spoke in bright, loud voices, their conversation a frantic, bustling attempt to fill the profound, Eleanor-shaped hole in our family. They treated me with a gentle, suffocating solicitude, as if I were a sick patient who might relapse at any moment. They asked me how I was sleeping, if I was eating enough, their questions a checklist of concern that had nothing to do with my actual state of being. Halfway through the meal, my son Mark cleared his throat. "So, Dad," he began, his tone a little too casual. Did you get a chance to look at that thing we sent you? The Silver Linings subscription? The website is supposed to be really easy to use." Sarah chimed in immediately, her voice full of the same therapeutic encouragement. "You have to get back out there, Dad. It's what Mom would have wanted. She wouldn't want you to be alone." Their words, their unified front of well-intentioned ignorance, solidified my resolve. I calmly placed my fork down, wiped my mouth with my napkin, and looked at them. "Actually," I began, my voice steady and quiet, commanding the attention of the entire table, "I thought a lot about your gift. And you're right. It's a terrible thing to be alone with your grief. A person in that situation absolutely needs to start a new chapter. I saw the looks of relieved self-satisfaction on their faces. They thought their intervention had worked. I reached into the inner pocket of my jacket and pulled out the small, elegant gift box. I placed it on the center of the table. "Your logic is undeniable," I continued, my gaze moving from my son to my daughter. "Which is why I couldn't possibly use this myself. My grief is too new, too raw. But I knew someone who could benefit from your wisdom. Someone whose grief is much older, much more entrenched." I paused, letting the silence hang in the air before delivering the final, quiet blow. "So, I gave it to Grandpa George. After all, he's been grieving Grandma Martha for 10 years. I figured he was long overdue to get back out there. The reaction was instantaneous and profound. The color drained from my children's faces. Mark's mouth hung open slightly, a piece of roasted potato halfway to his lips. Sarah stared at me, her eyes wide with a dawning, horrified disbelief. They were processing the full implication of my action, that I had taken their modern, therapeutic solution for grief and applied it to their grieving, 85-year-old maternal grandfather. The thought of their stoic, dignified grandfather receiving a subscription to a dating app was so absurd, so profoundly disrespectful in their eyes, that it had short-circuited their entire belief system. The dinner ended in a cold, stunned silence. My point had been made. The phone call came the next afternoon, as I knew it would. It was Sarah, her voice a frantic, incredulous mixture of anger and confusion. "Dad, what have you done?" she began, her voice cracking. "Grandpa George just called me. He was so confused. He got a welcome package from a dating website. He thought it was a scam. I had to explain it to him." "How could you do that to him, Dad? It was a cruel, horrible, disrespectful thing to do to a grieving old man." Her words were a torrent of righteous indignation, the accusations flying fast and furious. I let her finish, her anger washing over me without effect. I did not feel guilty. I felt a cold, clear sense of calm. "Was it, Sarah?" I asked, my voice quiet and measured. "Was it cruel and horrible and disrespectful? Or was it just cruel and horrible and disrespectful when it was done to your grandfather, but not when it was done to your father? I simply followed your own advice. You told me that a person grieving the loss of a spouse should get back out there. Your grandfather has been grieving his spouse for a decade. By your logic, my gift to him was 10 years overdue." There was a stunned silence on the other end of the line. My simple, direct reflection of their own logic had left her with no rhetorical ground to stand on. For the first time, she was being forced to confront the callousness of her own actions, stripped of the self-serving narrative that it was for my own good. The hypocrisy of her anger was laid bare, and she had no defense against it. She had been so certain of her own compassionate wisdom, and I had just shown her that her wisdom was, in fact, a form of profound disrespect. "This was never about me being happy, Sarah," I continued, my voice softening slightly, the anger replaced by a deep, weary sadness. "This was about you and Mark being uncomfortable with my grief. You see my sadness as a problem to be fixed, not as a testament to the 40 years of love I shared with your mother. Your gift wasn't a kindness, it was an eviction notice. You were trying to evict your mother from my heart so someone new could move in. Did you really think she was that easily replaceable? Did you think my love for her was so shallow that it could be patched over with a new relationship a week after her funeral?" The conversation ended without an apology from her, but the angry, accusatory tone was gone, replaced by a quiet, shaken uncertainty. I had not won an argument. I had forced a moment of painful, necessary reflection. I had held up a mirror to my children, and for the first time, they were forced to see the ugly, thoughtless nature of their own kindness. The chasm between us was still there, but now, at least, they were being forced to look down and see how deep it truly was. A week passed in a tense, silent stalemate. I didn't hear from my children, and I didn't reach out. I spent my days in a state of limbo, unsure if my act of defiance had burned the final bridge between us or if it had created a space for a new, more honest foundation to be built. Then, one afternoon, the phone rang. It was George, my father-in-law. My stomach clenched. I expected a call of confusion, or worse, of anger, now that his grandchildren had likely explained the full, sordid story of the dating app subscription. His voice, when he spoke, was not angry. It was a low, raspy chuckle, a sound I hadn't heard from him in a very long time. "Henry," he said, the amusement clear in his voice. "Your daughter called me, trying to explain the situation. A dating website for me. At my age." He let out another dry laugh. "That was a hell of a thing to do, son. A hell of a thing." It made me laugh. I mean really, truly laugh, for the first time since we lost her. I was so taken aback by his reaction, I was momentarily speechless. "Those kids," he continued, his tone shifting from amusement to a weary, shared understanding. "They mean well, but they don't have a clue, do they? They think grief is a problem you can solve, like a leaky faucet. They think you can just replace a person. They did the same thing to me after my Martha passed away. Tried to sign me up for a senior citizens bowling league. As if a new hobby could replace 60 years of a shared life. They're good kids, Henry, but they're scared of sadness. They're scared of a love that lasts even after a person is gone." In that single conversation, a new, powerful, and unexpected alliance was forged. We were no longer just a son-in-law and a father-in-law, connected by the woman we had both lost. We were comrades, two soldiers of a forgotten war, the the war of honoring a lifelong love in a world that demands we move on. He understood my action not as an insult to him, but as a perfectly aimed message to his grandchildren, a lesson in the nature of real grief that he himself had been trying to teach them for years. George became my anchor in the lonely sea of my mourning. We started a new tradition of our own. Every Sunday, I would go to his house, and we would sit in his study, surrounded by his books and his memories, and we would talk about Eleanor. We shared stories they had never heard, small, intimate moments that defined our love for her. We weren't trying to fix each other's grief. We were bearing witness to it. We were keeping her memory alive, not as a sad story, but as a vibrant, living presence in our hearts. And in that shared act of remembrance, we found a new kind of family, a quiet, resilient bond forged in our shared, unending love for her. The apology from my children, when it came, was not a single, dramatic event, but a slow, awkward, and incremental process. It started with a phone call from Mark, his voice strained and humbled. "Dad," he said, "Sarah and we've been talking. And we were wrong. What we did was insensitive. We're sorry." It was a start, but the words still felt clinical, as if they had been rehearsed. The real change came not in what they said, but in what they started to do. They stopped trying to fix my grief and, for the first time, simply started to sit with me in it. My personal growth, my own path forward, was not about demanding a more profound apology, but about accepting their clumsy, imperfect attempts at reconciliation. I had made my point. Now I had a choice. I could hold on to my righteous anger and remain isolated, or I could use this as an opportunity to teach them what I had so desperately wanted them to understand. I chose to teach. I began to talk about Eleanor openly, not just as their mother, but as my wife, my partner, my best friend. I shared stories of our early years, of our struggles, of the simple, everyday moments that had woven the tapestry of our life together. A new, tangible project was born from these conversations. I decided to turn the corner of our backyard that Eleanor had always loved, the part with the overgrown rose bushes and the crumbling stone bench, into a memorial garden for her. It was a way to channel my grief into something creative and beautiful, a living tribute to her memory. I didn't ask for my children's help, but after I had started the hard work of clearing the weeds and tilling the soil, they began to show up. At first, they would just watch, hesitant and unsure of their place. But then, Mark picked up a shovel, and Sarah started pruning the roses. We spent the next few weekends working together in the dirt, under the warmth of the spring sun. And as we worked, we talked. They asked questions about their mother they had never asked before. They shared their own memories, their own grief, which they had been hiding under a veneer of forced positivity. We were finally mourning her together, not as a doctor and a patient, but as a family, united in our shared loss. The garden became a symbol of our healing, a physical manifestation of our family's new chapter. It was not the chapter of forgetting and replacing that they had initially tried to write for me. It was a chapter of remembrance, of honoring the past, of understanding that the people we love are never truly gone as long as we tend to their memory. The garden was a place where Eleanor's presence could be felt, not as a sad ghost, but as a source of enduring beauty and a testament to a love that death could not diminish. 1 year to the day after Eleanor's funeral, we gathered in the completed memorial garden. The rose bushes were heavy with fragrant, crimson blooms, and a new stone bench sat where the old, crumbling one had been. The late afternoon sun cast a warm, golden light over the small gathering. It was just me, my children and their spouses, and George. It was not a sad occasion, but a peaceful, reflective one. We were not there to mourn her death, but to celebrate her life. We shared our favorite memories of her, our stories punctuated by laughter and a few quiet, gentle tears. My relationship with my children had found a new, more honest rhythm. The forced cheerfulness was gone, replaced by a comfortable, authentic connection. They had learned to see my grief not as a weakness to be cured, but as a measure of my love. They no longer tried to fill the silence, understanding that it was not empty, but full of memory. They had grown, and in the process, they had allowed me the space to truly heal, not by moving on, but by moving forward with Eleanor's love as a permanent part of my heart. George was a quiet, steady presence at the gathering, a patriarch not of blood, but of shared experience. Our friendship had become one of the most important in my life, a bond forged in the crucible of our shared loss. We were the keepers of the flame, the two men who had loved her longest. We understood each other without words, a silent, resilient partnership against the forgetting that time inevitably brings. We were the living embodiment of her legacy. At the end of the evening, as the sun began to set, my son Mark handed me a small, plain white envelope. My name was written on the front. I opened it. Inside was the original gift card for the Silver Linings dating app. I looked at him, confused. "It expires today, Dad," he said, a small, wry smile on his face. "We thought you should be the one to officially throw it away." In that simple, symbolic gesture, the circle was complete. It was an acknowledgement of their mistake, a final, definitive end to their misguided project to fix me, and a quiet celebration of the new, more honest chapter we had managed to build together. Grief is not a problem to be solved. It's a landscape we must travel, a sacred space of memory and love. But in a world that is terrified of sadness, we are so often told to move on, to get over it, to fill the void. Have you ever had your own grief misunderstood? Have you ever had someone try to rush you through your own healing? Share your story in the comments below. Let's talk about the profound importance of honoring our own timeline for mourning. Your experience is a testament to the enduring power of love and memory. If this story resonated with you, subscribe, and share it with anyone who knows that the truest love stories don't end when a life does.